Come now to motion number 4, relating to the UK's withdrawal from the European Union. I have provisionally selected the following amendments, colleagues, in the following order. And F, in the name of the Right Honourable Member for Normanton, Pontefract and Castleford, Yvette Cooper. I remind the House that reference may be made in debate to any of the amendments on the paper, including those which I have not selected. Yvette Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I follow the Honourable Member for Stone, I would just, only point out to him I'm not convinced that other European countries are looking at us with any kind of envy at the moment, given the confusion and chaos we seem to be in. I want to move Amendment F and also speak to Amendments A, B and C. We are back here again at our usual fortnightly gathering, in which nothing has changed. Mr. Speaker, the only thing that's changed in our family is that Ed is currently halfway up Kilimanjaro with Little Mix, Danny Dyer and Shirley Ballas for comic relief, and which has cued a whole series of bad jokes about which is harder, climbing an extremely high mountain or trying to get anybody to agree anything over BrExit. And I fear that his mountain climb is going to be considerably shorter than our repeated debates on this. I want to just deal particularly with the amendments first before, if I have time, for the wider issue. The Government has changed its position on the next steps if there is no deal in place and agreed by the middle of March. And this is clearly a result of our cross-party bill and cross-party pressure. And I wanted to pay tribute particularly to the work of the Honourable Member for Dorset West and for Grantham, as well as and for Meriden, as well as my Right Honourable friends and Member for Leeds Central, for Birmingham Erdington, and also for Leicester West as well, because this has been a lot of cross-party work to get this far. Frankly, it shouldn't have taken this, and it shouldn't have taken the threats of resignation by cabinet ministers to get the government to do something sensible and just put in place parliamentary safeguards in order to avert the kind of no deal that would be hugely chaotic, that nobody has done the preparation for, that would mean a real hit to our manufacturing industry, disadvantaging British manufacturing right around the world, that would hit medicine supplies, would push food prices up in shops, the kind of deeply irresponsible circumstances for our constituents. However, I do still have some questions and need some assurances, because we have had votes promised and then pulled, we have had motions passed and then ignored, and I would hope that the BrExit Secretary will repeat the reassurances, because he will know I have raised questions about his previous dismissing of motions and saying that legislation took priority, and previously saying that no deal on March the 29th was the default option. I heard the Secretary of State for the Cabinet Office say earlier instead that the default position had now changed and it would no longer be the policy of the government to pursue no deal on March the 29th if there wasn't a deal in place in time, and that instead government policy would now be to respect the decision of the House on whether to pursue no deal or an extension of Article 50. And I would just like to have that confirmation. To have confirmation, too, that
I'm very grateful. She's making an excellent speech. In addition to that confirmation, which I too would like to hear from ministers today, would she like to hear, as I would like to hear, what the government will actually do in that vote? Will they vote against no deal, or could they extraordinarily vote for no deal?
Well, I think that's a hugely important point, and I'll just finish these quick things because then I'll come on to that point. The confirmation to my friend for Leeds Central that the motions will be amendable. And also this key issue about if there is a disagreement. Let's suppose there is a disagreement between the EU and the UK, perhaps one side suggesting 3 months, one side suggesting 2 months. In those circumstances, we just need the reassurance that the government won't shrug its shoulders and say, OK, we didn't get an agreement, we're now just going to pursue no deal after all, and instead we'll come back to this House and allow for some process of resolution if there is a disagreement. And then I really would urge ministers to say how the government would vote. Because until we will have our bill, we will keep in reserve. We hope that with these assurances, we do not need to press Amendment C today. I do hope to press Amendment F. I do hope that we can have that confirmation and clarity of what the Prime Minister has said as part of the motion. But I think it was also important for the government to provide some clarity about how it would vote, because businesses still don't know exactly whether there's going to be a majority or not, and we can give them some assurances about how people have voted in the past, but the thing they really want to hear is what government would do in those circumstances. Will government, faced with that choice, really want to say, we actually want to cause huge problems for medicine supplies for the NHS, huge problems for the short-life radioisotopes that are used for cancer treatment, huge problems for our manufacturing industry, or turn motorways into car parks? Will the government really honestly want to do that, rather than just say, do you know what, we might need a bit more time? I'll give way to them.
Ask her a question. She's taking such a prominent part in this debate. The same question I put to several people today. Would she countenance the idea on behalf of those trade unionists and those workers who, for example, worked in the ports, who were completely against the ports regulation, that those laws should be made in the Council of Ministers under the control over laws issue I've raised just now, behind closed doors, without a transcript, and effectively be imposed on the United Kingdom without our even being there?
Hear, hear, Bill.
Say to the honourable member that we have to get some form of sensible agreement in place so that people can get on with their lives, so that people aren't threatened with the insecurity of having complete chaos from whatever source if we end up with no deal. I also briefly support Amendment A, and in particular the proposal for a customs union. I would just say to ministers, I think if they were honest about being able to reach out and trying to build some consensus around something, they would actually recognise that many of the points that are in Amendment A, if in fact they were put to a free vote across this House, I suspect they would get a majority, and I suspect that would be a consensus way forward. And then if I wanted to just deal with the concerns that I have about the tone of the debate. The Right Honourable Member for Meriden earlier said that she hoped the tone of the debate was changing and hoped there would be some spirit of compromise. I would say I look forward to that, but I am worried that I have still, even today, had comments from members of this House about the agreement that the Prime Minister came to yesterday, but accusing those of us who've been calling for it, again, of being mutinous, plotters, saboteurs and blackmailers. And I would say I think this is really inappropriate, divisive and counterproductive. It really does not, I think, fit with the kind of debate we ought to be having about something so important, particularly when I frankly think it is hugely patriotic to be trying to make sure we can stand up for British manufacturing, make sure the NHS can get its medicines and make sure that British families across the country don't have to pay higher food prices in shops. And I would say as a final thought that in the end, wherever we get to in this Brexit process has to have some form of consensus around it, or it will not be sustainable. And that is what we should all keep in mind.
Mr. Richard Drax.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure to